Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at the work of Govind Sadashiv Ghurye,
Oh, yeah?
a really fascinating figure
Mm-hmm.
who's often called the father of Indian sociology.
Right.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. 31 books
Wow.
and countless articles. That sounds a little daunting,
Yeah,
but that's where we come in.
that's right.
We've got some excerpts from a book about his life and work,
Uh-huh.
and we're going to distill those key insights for you.
I love it.
So,
It's amazing how much ground he covered,
right.
from caste system and kinship to urbanization and the evolution of Indian culture. He even wrote about the disposal of human placentas.
I mean, talk about range.
Yeah.
Before we jump into all that, let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Who was Ghurye,
Yeah.
and how did he become such a major figure in Indian sociology?
Well, he had this incredible academic journey. He
Yeah.
excelled in languages from a young age, mastered sociology,
Wow.
and then went on to study at Cambridge under the renowned W.H.R. Rivers. That experience really shaped his thinking.
That's quite a pedigree, and it sounds like he really made his mark not just through his writing,
Right.
but by actually building up the field of sociology in India.
Absolutely. He established the Department of Sociology at Bombay University,
Oh, wow.
which became a hub for some of India's leading sociologists. He wasn't just writing about society, he was shaping the very discipline that studies it.
So he was a scholar, a mentor, and an institution builder.
Okay.
I'm starting to see why he's considered such a giant in the field. But what about his approach? What made his way of studying Indian society so unique?
That's where it gets really interesting. Ghurye had this remarkable ability to blend what we call the indological with the empirical.
Now, hold on. Those terms might sound a little jargony.
Yeah.
Could you break that down for us? What does it mean to combine the indological with the empirical?
You're right. Let me clarify that. Basically, the indological refers to the study of ancient Indian texts and scriptures. Ghurye believed these texts offered valuable insights into the historical evolution of social structures and beliefs. The empirical, on the other hand, refers to the use of observation and data collection, more modern sociological methods.
So he was kind of bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and modern social science.
Exactly. He saw those ancient texts as a window into the past, but he also believed in using modern tools to analyze and understand society in the present. It was a really unique approach.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Okay, so let's dive into some of his specific areas of research.
Mm-hmm.
I know one of his major contributions was his work on caste and kinship. This is one of those topics that I always find so fascinating, but also a bit complicated.
It definitely can be complex, but Ghurye's book, Caste and Race in India, published in 1932, is considered a classic in the field. In it, he argues that the Indian caste system, while unique in many ways, actually has parallels in other societies around the world.
Really, I always thought it was a purely Indian phenomenon.
It's a common assumption, but Ghurye points out that similar systems of social stratification have existed throughout history and in different cultures. He also highlighted how the caste system historically served a purpose. It brought diverse groups together under a common social order.
So he saw it as a framework for integration, not just as a system of division.
Exactly. Now, that doesn't mean he was blind to the inequalities and injustices of the caste system. He identified 6 key features, things like hierarchy, concepts of pollution and purity, and restrictions on marriage and occupation.
Okay, I see what you mean about the complexity. It sounds like he was trying to understand the system in all its nuances, both its historical function and its present-day realities.
Yes, and he also delved into the intricacies of kinship, showing how the concept of gotra or clan plays a role in endogamy within the caste system.
So it's not just about caste, but about the intricate kinship ties that further shape social interactions.
Exactly. Ghurye connected gotra to both blood ties and spiritual lineage, arguing that these two elements are deeply intertwined in the Indian social structure.
This is already giving me so much to think about. Now, I know Ghurye also had some interesting and maybe even controversial views on tribes in India. What can you tell us about that?
His perspective on tribes, which he outlined in his book, The Scheduled Tribes, definitely sparked debate. He argued that tribes weren't fundamentally separate from Hindu society, but rather represented what he called an imperfect integration into the caste system.
So he saw them as part of the larger social fabric, but not fully absorbed. That seems like it could be a sensitive topic.
It was and still is. Ghurye believed that many tribes were gradually being integrated into the Hindu fold, a process he observed during his research. But other scholars like Verrier Elwin strongly disagreed. Elwin argued for preserving tribal cultures and allowing them to develop independently without being assimilated.
That's a pretty stark contrast in viewpoints. I can see why this would be a point of contention. It makes you think about how these different perspectives might influence policies and approaches to tribal communities.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it raises some important questions for us to consider. How do we balance the preservation of unique cultures with the integration of diverse groups into a larger society? What are the ethical implications of these different approaches?
These are big questions, and it's clear that Ghurye's work, even if controversial at times, has sparked important conversations about identity, belonging, and the dynamics of social change.
He definitely pushed people to think critically about these issues. And that's one of the things that makes his work so enduringly relevant.
Okay, before we move on, I want to touch on another area where Ghurye's work continues to resonate, the dynamics of rural urbanization. I know he was interested in how cities were evolving in India, especially during a time of rapid social and economic change.
You're right, this was a recurring theme throughout his career. Ghurye meticulously traced the historical development of Indian cities, from ancient trade centers to the bustling metropolises of his time.
What were some of his key observations about this transition? Did he see it as purely positive, or were there challenges and complexities that he highlighted?
Ghurye was definitely aware of the challenges. He saw how the growth of cities, particularly during the colonial period, led to massive shifts in traditional life. Industrial growth was driving this urbanization, but he emphasized that it wasn't just about factories and jobs, it was a fundamental reshaping of social and economic structures.
So he was looking beyond the purely economic aspects of urbanization.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was interested in how cities were impacting social relationships, cultural practices, and even people's sense of identity. He saw how cities brought new opportunities, but also new problems, things like congestion, pollution, and social inequality.
It sounds like he was grappling with issues that are still incredibly relevant today. I
Yeah.
mean, think about the challenges facing cities all over the world, especially as they continue to grow at such a rapid pace.
Exactly. Ghurye's work offers valuable insights into the complexities of urbanization insights that can inform urban planning policymaking, and even our own understanding of what it means to live in a rapidly changing urban environment. It's fascinating how Ghurye was both a product of his time and someone who seemed to be looking ahead, trying to understand those forces that would shape the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like he was standing at this crossroads of tradition and modernity, using this wisdom of the past to illuminate the challenges of the present and the future.
Precisely. And he didn't shy away from the complexities. He was deeply rooted in Indian traditions.
Right.
But he also embraced the tools of modern social science to analyze and interpret those traditions.
It seems like he understood that you really need a multifaceted approach to truly grasp a society as diverse and dynamic as India.
Absolutely. He didn't just rely on one method or perspective. He used quantitative data, empirical observations, and also delved into the lived experiences of the people he studied.
It's like he was trying to understand India from multiple angles. Its history, its social structures, its culture, and the hearts and minds of its people.
Exactly. And this brings us to one of his most insightful contributions, his work on the evolution of Indian culture and civilization.
Okay, this is something I'm really eager to dig into. We touched on it earlier, but I'd love to explore Ghurye's ideas about cultural evolution in more depth. How did he see cultures changing and adapting over time?
Well, he saw culture as a dynamic process, not something static or fixed. He believed that understanding the historical trajectory of a culture was essential to understanding its present state.
So it's not about taking a snapshot of a culture at a specific moment, but about tracing its journey through time, recognizing the influences that have shaped its identity.
Yes, and Ghurye was particularly fascinated by what we call diffusion, the spread of ideas, practices, and beliefs from one culture to another.
I can see how that would be especially relevant in the context of India, which has such a long history of cultural exchange and interaction.
Absolutely. He recognized that India had always been a crossroads of cultures, a meeting point for diverse influences. He saw how these interactions had enriched Indian civilization, leading to the blending of traditions, the adaptation of new ideas, and the creation of something vibrant and unique.
So he was challenging the notion of cultural purity, arguing that the most interesting cultures are often those that have embraced influences from outside and woven them into their own traditions.
Precisely. He saw Indian culture as a tapestry with threads from many different sources woven together over centuries, and he believed that this process of cultural exchange and adaptation was ongoing, shaping the India of his time and continuing to shape it today.
It makes you wonder what he would make of globalization and the speed at which ideas and cultures are interconnected in our digital age. I imagine he'd be fascinated by the impact of the internet and social media.
Oh, I have no doubt. He was a keen observer of social dynamics. I can picture him diving into those virtual worlds, studying how technology is shaping our interactions, beliefs, and even our sense of identity.
It's a reminder that even though Ghurye was writing decades ago, his work still offers us valuable insights into the human condition and how cultures evolve and adapt to changing circumstances.
And one of the key takeaways from his work is that change is inevitable. Societies are constantly in flux, responding to new challenges, integrating new ideas, and redefining their values and norms.
So it's not about resisting change, but understanding the forces that drive it and navigating those changes in a way that preserves what's essential while also embracing new possibilities.
Exactly. And for Ghurye, understanding the historical context was crucial. He believed that to understand the present, you have to delve into the past to see how a culture has been shaped by its history, its interactions with others, and the broader social, political, and economic forces at play.
It reminds me of that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Ghurye seems to be saying that to understand a culture, you need to understand its history, its journey through time.
Yes, and he provides us with a framework for doing just that. Okay, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about Ghurye's focus on social tensions. We live in a world that often feels increasingly polarized with divisions along political, social, and cultural lines. Did Ghurye grapple with similar issues in his time?
Absolutely. In fact, he dedicated a significant portion of his research to understanding the root causes of social tensions. He recognized that conflict is inherent in social life. Societies are made up of diverse groups with different interests and goals, and that inevitably leads to friction and clashes. So he wasn't advocating for some kind of utopian vision of perfect social harmony. He saw conflict as a natural part of the social fabric.
Exactly. But he also believed that conflict could be managed and even harnessed for positive change. He argued that understanding the historical and social context of these tensions was crucial for finding solutions.
So it's not about suppressing conflict, but about understanding where it comes from and finding ways to address the underlying issues.
Right. He was a big proponent of dialogue, finding common ground, and working towards solutions that promote justice and reconciliation.
It makes you wonder what he would make of the state of the world today, with all the divisions and conflicts we see playing out.
I think he would urge us to look beyond the surface level differences, to engage in meaningful conversations, and to work towards a more just and equitable society. He was passionate about social justice.
His work definitely speaks to the need for understanding empathy and a willingness to bridge divides. Okay, I want to touch on another aspect of Ghurye's work that I found intriguing, his interest in Indian costume. I have to admit, I hadn't thought about clothing as a subject for serious sociological study.
It might seem surprising, but Ghurye recognized that clothing is more than just fabric and fashion. It's a powerful symbol of identity, culture, and social status.
So he was looking at the social meanings we attach to clothing, the stories that our clothes tell about who we are, where we come from.
Exactly. He saw how different styles of dress fabrics, colors, and even the way garments were draped could convey information about a person's caste, religion, region, occupation, and even their personal beliefs and values.
It's like he was decoding a secret language embedded in the way people dress.
That's a great way to put it. He meticulously documented various styles of dress across different communities in India, tracing their historical evolution and analyzing the cultural significance behind each garment.
So he wasn't just describing clothes. He was trying to understand what they reveal about the people who wear them and the society they live in.
Precisely. His work on Indian costume gives us a glimpse into the incredible diversity of Indian culture and shows how clothing choices can serve as markers of identity and social distinction. It's fascinating.
You know, it reminds me of how we still make judgments about people based on their clothing even today. We might form opinions about someone's profession, social status, or even their personality just by looking at what they're wearing.
It's true, and Ghurye's work shows how those judgments are often rooted in cultural norms and historical precedents. He helps us see that clothing choices are rarely arbitrary. They're informed by a whole web of factors: personal preferences, social expectations, cultural traditions, and even economic constraints.
This is making me think more critically about my own clothing choices. Okay, I know we're running out of time, but there's one more area I'd like to explore. Ghurye's study of the sociology of conflict and integration. You've mentioned this throughout our conversation, but I think it's worth delving into a bit deeper.
Absolutely. This is where Ghurye's insights are particularly relevant to the world today. He understood that conflict is an inherent part of social life, that societies are composed of diverse groups with different interests, and that those differences inevitably lead to tension and clashes.
So he wasn't advocating for a utopian vision of a perfectly harmonious society. He saw conflict as a natural part of the social fabric.
Exactly. But he also believed that conflict could be managed constructively. He argued that understanding the root causes of conflict, the underlying power dynamics, and the historical context was crucial for finding solutions that promote justice and reconciliation.
So it's not about eliminating conflict altogether, but about finding ways to address the underlying issues and work towards a more equitable and harmonious society.
Precisely. And Ghurye also emphasized the importance of integration, of finding ways to bridge differences, foster dialogue, and create a sense of shared identity and purpose.
It sounds like he was advocating for a both-hand approach, recognizing the inevitability of conflict, while also striving for integration and understanding.
Yes, he saw conflict and integration as two sides of the same coin, both necessary for the healthy functioning of a society.
This is giving me a lot to think about, especially when we look at the world today with all its divisions and conflicts. It's a reminder that finding solutions requires recognizing the sources of conflict and having the willingness to work towards integration and understanding.
Well said, Ghurye's work offers us a framework for navigating these complex challenges, urging us to approach conflict with a critical eye, a compassionate heart, and a commitment to finding solutions that promote justice and harmony.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I have one question that might seem a little out of left field. Ghurye was known for his serious scholarship and intellectual curiosity. But I'm curious, did he ever have any fun? Did he ever let his hair down, so to speak?
That's a great question. While Ghurye was undoubtedly dedicated to his work, he also had a playful side, a sense of humor that sometimes came through in his writing and interactions with students.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, there's a story that's been passed down through generations of sociologists in India about Ghurye's fondness for a particular brand of Indian sweets. Apparently, he had a bit of a sweet tooth and would often treat his students to these sweets after lectures or during department gatherings.
So he wasn't all work and no play. He knew how to enjoy the sweeter things in life.
Exactly. It's these little glimpses into his personality that make him seem more relatable, more human. He wasn't just a brilliant mind. He was also someone who appreciated simple pleasures and shared them with others.
I love that. It reminds us that even the most serious scholars have their passions and quirks, things that bring them joy outside of their intellectual pursuits.
And it's often in those moments of shared joy, those seemingly insignificant interactions, that we truly connect with each other as human beings.
Well said. This has been a really enriching conversation. I feel like I'm starting to understand Ghurye not just as a scholar, but as a person.
Me too.
Yeah.
He was a complex and fascinating individual, and his work continues to challenge and inspire us.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into the final part of our deep dive. There's still so much to uncover about Ghurye's legacy and how his ideas continue to shape our understanding of society and culture.
I agree. There are some real gems left to explore.
So we've talked about Ghurye's unique approach to, Indian society,
Right.
his groundbreaking work on caste and kinship, his fascinating perspectives on urbanization and cultural evolution.
Uh-huh.
But there's one more area of his work
Okay.
that I think is really worth exploring, and that's his views on Indian art.
Hmm.
Now, you might be wondering,
Yeah.
what does art have to do with sociology?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's easy to think of art as something separate from the social world, something purely aesthetic. But Ghurye saw art as a reflection of the society and culture in which it's created. He believed that by studying art, you could gain insights into the values, the beliefs, and even the social structures of a particular time and place.
So he was interested in the social context of art, how it both shapes and is shaped by the world around it.
Exactly. He studied various forms of Indian art, from ancient sculptures to Mughal paintings to folk traditions. He analyzed their symbolic meanings, their historical evolution, and how they contributed to, cultural identity.
It's like he was using art as a lens to understand the soul of Indian civilization, to see the world through the eyes of the artists who created these works.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And his work on Indian art helps us appreciate the richness and complexity of India's cultural heritage. It reveals those layers of influence, the blending of tradition and innovation, and how art has been used for everything from social commentary to spiritual expression to political resistance.
It makes you realize that art is never just about aesthetics. It's a window into the hearts and minds of the people who created it, a reflection of their world and their experiences.
And Ghurye encourages us to look at art with that awareness, to see it not just as something beautiful, but as a product of its time and place, a story waiting to be told.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If Ghurye were alive today, what do you think he would be most curious about? What contemporary phenomenon would really capture his sociological imagination?
Hmm. That is a fascinating question. Given his interest in social dynamics, cultural evolution and the impact of technology,
Right.
I think he would be captivated by the rise of artificial intelligence
Oh, wow.
and its implications for the future of humanity.
Real.
I think so. I can imagine him diving headfirst into research on AI, attending conferences, interviewing experts, trying to grasp how this technology is transforming our world.
It's like he would want to understand how AI is changing the way we work, the way we communicate, think, and even how we experience reality itself.
Yeah, and I think he'd be excited by the potential, but also wary of the risks, urging us to approach this powerful technology with, wisdom and foresight.
That's really interesting. It's a reminder that even as the world changes, in these really dramatic ways,
Right.
the fundamental questions Ghurye explored about identity, belonging, social justice, and the meaning of human existence remain incredibly relevant.
They do. His work provides us with a framework for grappling with these questions in our own time. He challenges us to think critically, to question assumptions, and to seek a deeper understanding of the forces shaping our lives and our world.
Well said. It's been an incredible journey exploring the life and work of G.S. Ghurye. He was a true visionary, a scholar who dedicated his life to understanding the complexities of Indian society and the human condition.
I agree. And his legacy continues to inspire us to approach the world with curiosity, with a critical eye, and with a commitment to making it a more just and equitable place.
Listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your interest in Ghurye's work. If you're eager to learn more, we encourage you to explore his writings and discover the richness and depth of his thought.
As always, keep those minds curious, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.